Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video is for class 10th. The book, the supplementary reader Footprints Without Feet. First chapter, A Triumph of Surgery. Now I am going to explain this chapter line by line in this video, and I hope this video will help you to understand the chapter. So without wasting any time, let's start with it. Open your NCRT books and to the first chapter, and I am going to read the chapter line by line, and I am going to give you an explanation. You can follow the video, and with your book in your hand you can also take a pencil in your hand, and whenever I ask you to write some difficult meaning or mark something, you can mark it in your book for further reference. So, in the beginning of the chapter, there's a box, gray colored box, just below the title, A Triumph of Surgery. And the box says, Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. Now, Tricky was the name of a dog, and he was pampered. Pampered means excessive love and kindness shown to someone. And overfed means he was excessively given food and everything by the mistress. Now, this dog fell seriously ill, and his mistress consulted a veterinary surgeon. Now, who's a veterinary surgeon? Veterinary surgeon means a surgeon or a doctor who is specialized to look after the diseases of animals, domestic and pet animals. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? These are the two questions which are going to be answered by the author through this chapter. Okay. So before starting the chapter, let me tell you that there are three main characters in this chapter. First is Tricky the dog. Second is the mistress or the owner of the dog. Her name is Mrs. Pumphrey. And third is James Harriet. He is the veterinary surgeon, and he happens to be the author of this chapter. He's talking to you in first person context, means wherever I, me has been used in this chapter, it is used for James Harriet. He is the one who's narrating the chapter to you through this book. Okay, so the first paragraph starts. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress. Now, who is this I? I told you whenever first person context is used, it is the author or the narrator. And in this chapter, in this case, the author or the narrator is Mr. James Harriet or the veterinary surgeon. So he was very worried about Tricky because he pulled his car, means he stopped his car at the side of the road. And what did he saw? What was so surprising that he has to stop his car? He saw the mistress, means Mrs. Pumphrey, with the dog. And Tricky's appearance, the way he was looking, really worried the narrator or James Harriet. He was becoming hugely fat. He was excessively fat, the dog, like a bloated sausage. Bloated means something which is heavy, filled with. And sausage is a kind of food. It is cylindrical food which is made out of mincing the meat, processing the meat. Okay, it is generally eaten with by grilling it or frying it before, and it is packed. So he's giving a comparison that Tricky looked like a bloated sausage with a leg on each corner. His eyes were bloodshot and rheumy. Bloodshot means completely red, and rheumy means watery, filled with water. So Tricky's eyes were red and watery. That means Tricky is suffering from some illness or some problem. Stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. So Tricky was looking straight ahead, and from his jaws the tongue was lolled out, means the tongue was out. You see when dogs are gasping for breath, so their tongues come out generally. So that is the case here also. So Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. Hastened means very quickly, बहुत जल्दबाजी से उन्होंने explain किया. He was so listless. Listless means lacks energy. Who is this he? He is Tricky. Now Mrs. Pumphrey is explaining about the dog, saying he was so listless, Mr. Harriet. Now she's talking to the narrator. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. Malnutrition means when you do not get proper nutrition from your food and you are suffering due to that. So I have been giving him some little extra between meals to build him up. Means the lady is giving extra meals to Tricky in between his meals to make up for the malnutrition, because she thinks that Tricky is suffering from malnutrition. Some malt. Now what extra was she giving? Some malt. Malt is barley or some other grain okay, which you eat. And cod liver oil is a fish oil which is extracted from the liver of the fish. It is beneficial for health. And also giving him a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. So you see, the problem here is that Tricky is excessively fat. Still, this lady, the owner of the dog, is giving extra meals to Tricky. She is not able to understand the problem of the dog, and we can say that yes, this is the nature of this lady, the extra love or care or pampering nature towards the dog, that is responsible for this condition of the dog. And then the narrator asked the lady, "Did you cut down on the sweet things I told you?" This line shows that this is not the first meeting between them. She has already been consulting Mr. Harriet about Tricky's health. And previously, she might have told Mr. Harriet that she was giving a lot of sweets to Tricky. And that is what Harriet asked, that have you cut down on the sweets, or are you still giving him the sweets? That's the question. So the lady replied, "Oh, I did for a bit." Means she tried to stop it, but he seemed to be so weak, I had to relent. But according to the lady, Tricky was looking so weak that she had to relent. She had to relent means she stopped being hard on Tricky and she started giving back the sweet things to him. He does love cream cakes and chocolates. Now, this is what she thinks that Tricky loves. Obviously, dogs' metabolism are not like humans. They cannot digest everything which we can digest. Although they will eat everything, but it will somewhere or the other harm them. But due to her excessive love, this lady is not able to understand these things, and these are the reasons why Tricky has turned out to be in such bad physical condition. I looked down again at the little dog. Now, this narrator looked at the dog and he said, "That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault is greed. Tricky is so greedy that he can never say no to anything which is served to him in his food bowl. And that's the reason he eats everything. He has never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. Any time you can give food to him and he will gulp it down. That was the nature of this dog. He was always ready to eat, and that is why he's fat." And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. Then the doctor asked the second question, "Are you giving him plenty of exercise?" So she said, "Well, he had his little walks with me. You see these walkings and all which we are doing. But Hotkin the gardener," now she's talking about another person, the gardener. She was a rich lady. She had a lot of servants at home. So he's saying the gardener has been down with lumbago. What's this lumbago? Lumbago is a type of muscular pain in the lower back. So she's saying that gardener is suffering from this muscular pain in the lower back, and that is why there is no ring throwing game. That gardener used to play that ring throwing game with Tricky, and that was very important for Tricky's physical exercises. But due to the bad health of the gardener, this thing is not being continued right now. This is the second thing that is told by the lady to Mr. Harriet. So she's also not cutting down the sweets, and Tricky's physical exercises are also not being conducted properly. These could be the reasons why this dog is suffering from these type of conditions. Okay, now we move to page number 2. So the page number 2 starts by these lines. "I tried to sound severe." I is the narrator or James Harriet. So he said, "I tried to sound severe." Severe means serious, straightforward. "Now I really mean this." Whenever some dialogues are written in inverted, double inverted comma, that means that is direct speech of the person who is saying them. So he says, "Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down," means if you don't stop right now giving him excessive food and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. Please cut down the food immediately and give him more and more exercise. Otherwise, your dog will be seriously ill. You must harden your heart and give him a very strict diet." So he said, try to control your love towards your dog and keep him on strict diet if you want him to survive. And this was the suggestion given by James Harriet to that lady. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Wrung is the past participle form of ring. Ring means to squeeze your hand, like you are determined to something. Yes, I will do it. So this gesture is known as wrung. So Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. "Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you are right. But it is so difficult, so very difficult, so difficult for that lady to do this thing because she loves her dog a lot and she cannot deny anything to the dog." She's set off, means she's now going away with the dog. This first meeting is over. Heading down along the road. as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Regime means some routine. I watched their progress with growing concern. Then a narrator is watching them going away. A narrator is quite concerned about the dog. And he says Tricky was tottering along. Tottering means walking with small steps, finding it difficult to walk, tottering along with his little tweed coat. Tweed is rough fabric, so Tricky was wearing a coat. Yes, dogs also have clothes to wear. You can search online. There are many online websites who sell these clothes for dogs. Obviously, Mrs. Pumphrey was a rich woman, so she could afford all these accessories for the dog. And Tricky was wearing this coat, and he had a whole wardrobe of these coats. Many coats he had for the cold weather, and he also had a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on means Tricky is struggling to walk, dropping in his harness. Now, dropping means bending towards something, and harness is the you can say the chain or the belt which is tied to the dog collar through which you take your dogs for a walk. I thought it would be long. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. Means looking at the condition of the dog, James Harriet thought that very soon this dog is going to be coming to me for treatment, because as far as Mrs. Pumphrey's nature is concerned, she's not going to solve anything out on her own because of her love towards the dog. So as expected by the narrator, the call came. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught, completely disappointed, distressed. Tricky would eat nothing. Tricky had stopped eating anything, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. Bouts means an intense period. So he was suffering from intense vomiting. There is some really serious problem with this dog right now. He spent all his time lying on the rug. Rug means the carpet or his bed. Panting means gasping for breath. Didn't want to go for the walks, didn't want to do anything. And the narrator said that I had already made my plans in advance, because he was well aware of the situation and he knew that very soon he is going to receive this call. And he said the only way was to get Tricky out of that house for a period. For some time period, he has to get Tricky out of that house. So he suggested that Tricky should be hospitalized for about a fortnight and should be kept under observation. Fortnight means 2 weeks. So this hospital we are talking about, this is the clinic of Mr. James Harriet, because he was a veterinary surgeon. He was the animal doctor himself. So he said, send Tricky to my hospital for at least 2 weeks. The poor lady almost swooned. She was crying badly because she don't want Tricky to go away from her. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. That lady thought that if Tricky will not see me for even one day, he will die. And she was really worried. But somehow she put a stone on her heart and she sent Tricky towards the clinic. But I took a firm line. I is, as I told you, the narrator. Narrator said I was very firm, and Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it's best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailing. Wailing means crying. So he quickly took Tricky with him, and Mrs. Pumphrey was crying when she saw Tricky going away. The narrator is saying, I marched out to my car and took the dog with me wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff means the people who were working at Mrs. Pumphrey's house. Now I told you she was a very rich lady, so she has a lot of people to look after her and the house. Entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out bringing his bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl, everything that Tricky owned. The servants were rushing so that they could give everything to James Harriet, because Tricky was going, so all this stuff might be needed by him. So see how pampered this dog is. So he was loved so much by Mrs. Pumphrey that he was given five-star treatment. You see, different bowls for dinner, for breakfast, for lunch, everything was there available. Quite surprising, isn't it? Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. And narrator saw and he thought, oh my god, so much of things. My car is not going to accommodate all these things. So without stopping, without waiting for the servants to bring that stuff, he drove away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with desperately crying, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. And as he was about to go, Mrs. Pumphrey was crying, and she threw the coats through the car window so that some things could be given to Tricky. Okay, so this is the intensity of love that she had towards the dog. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner to drive. Everybody was in tears. So as he turned to a corner, he saw through the rear view mirror and everybody was crying. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. Now, when he was driving at the road, he looked on the next seat and he saw Tricky over there lying gasping for breath. And he patted on his head and he said, Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. As soon as he patted on his head, Tricky tried to wag his tail like dogs do lovingly. Na? That why. Poor old lad, I said. You haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. Means he said you don't have any energy left in you, but don't worry, I have a cure for you. So finally, the dog has reached the clinic or the surgery. Surgery means that particular place or the clinic where he will be treated by the narrator. So we move ahead. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. You know, if you have a pet dog and you enter the house, the dog quickly comes to you and tries to jump on you, to love you. And the dog like when you pat your hand on their head. So suddenly, as he entered, everybody, all the dogs surged him or surrounded him. And Tricky was also with him. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes. Now, narrator was holding Tricky up in his hand. So Tricky looked down at the noisy pack. Pack of dogs means group of dogs. And suddenly, the narrator put him down with the other dogs. Tricky lay motionless. Now, maybe he was afraid because he has never seen so many dogs together in one place. So he was afraid, and he was lying motionless over there over the carpet. The other dogs started sniffing him. You see, when dogs roam around here and there, they sniff, वो सूंघते हैं चीजों को. So the other dogs started sniffing Tricky for a few seconds, and after that they ignored him, thinking that this is quite uninteresting object. Uninteresting object is Tricky. So we move ahead. I made up a bed for him in the warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. So there the dogs used to sleep in a kind of box. So he made another box and he kept it beside the beds of the other dogs where Tricky could sleep. For 2 days, the narrator was quite watchful on Tricky. He kept eye on his dog and he only gave him water, no food. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. After 2 days, Tricky started showing some interest in the surroundings. Before that, he was completely motionless, lying at one particular place, completely afraid. But now he's trying to show interest. And on the third day, he began to whimper. Whimper means, kind of cries which dog make when they want to go out or they want to enjoy or they are unhappy or they are fearful. So Tricky starts to whimper when he heard the other dogs in the yard. Yard means the back area, the garden or the open space. So maybe he heard other dogs enjoying in the yard, barking in the yard, playing in the yard. So he also wants to go out. That is why he is whimpering. And so the narrator opened the door. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out. Trotted out means moved out with his small steps and immediately was engulfed by Joe. Suddenly, Joe engulfed him or surrounded him, like attacking him or capturing him. Engulfed him, and Joe is another dog. He is the greyhound. Greyhound is a breed. And his friends also came. Means Joe's friends means other dogs also came. After rolling Tricky over and inspecting him thoroughly, like sniffing him, checking him, when they realized that he's an uninteresting object, the dogs moved off. You have seen dogs now. When a new dog enters an area, these dogs bark at him, sniff him, and when they realize that okay, this is he's just another dog, nothing to be afraid of or nothing to be fearful of him, then these dogs become normal. And the same thing we see over here. Tricky followed them with his fat, means the fat which is hanging from his body due to his excessive weight. Later that day, I was present at the feeding time. I means the narrator, and I watched the feeding process while Tristan is one of the other men who was working at the surgery, slopped the food into the bowls. So every dog was given the food in the bowl, and Tricky was also given. There was a usual headlong rush followed by the sounds of high speed eating. You know now when dogs eat, they make some noises. So the dogs are eating with high speed. They are eating quickly. Why? Because they know that if I fall behind, maybe I have to fight for the last part of my food. Maybe the other dogs who will finish their food before me, they can come and attack on my food. So everybody was eating quickly because they knew that if they are left behind, they will be in competition for the last part of the meal. Clear? So we move ahead with the next page. That is page number 4. When they had finished, when they finished eating, Tricky took a walk around the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Now, up till now, no food was given to Tricky, but when the dogs finished eating, Tricky moved toward the bowl and he tried to lick one or two bowl. एक और दो bowl को उसने चाटने की कोशिश करी. तो next day an extra bowl was put out. Next day मतलब 3 दिन हो गए. 2 दिन तो उसको पानी दिया था खाली. Third day he was not given food. Now the next day यानी कि after 3 days another bowl was set. Another bowl for Tricky. Okay. I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. Jostling means trying to find his way towards the bowl, trying to trying to move in between the other dogs and go towards the place. From then on his progress was rapid, and now he started making progress, means started recovering. He was he had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. Means he used to play with the dogs day in, day out. No medicine was given to him. He was just being made familiar to the dogs and he used to run and play with the other dogs. Now, when he's running and playing with the other dogs, these are physical activities. Obviously, if you do physical activities and you eat less, you will become more fit and you will lose your weight. This is the method of treatment which is used by the doctor. He discovered the joys of being bowled over, tramped on, splashed every few minutes. Now he's playing with other dogs, so other dogs are pushing him. He's being bowled over means he's rolling on the grass, and he's tramped and he's squashed means other dogs are coming over him, pressing him, and he's enjoying. Like you have seen dogs playing on the street, in a similar way. He became an accepted member of the gang. All the other dogs accepted him. An unlikely silky little object among the shaggy crew. All the other members of the crew means all the other dogs were quite shaggy, means their appearance was quite big, rough, but this was a small silky addition to the group. Fighting like a tiger for his share at meal times and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. So he used to fight with the other dogs during the meal time for his share of food, and he used to hunt the rats. Now these dogs have a habit that if they see rats or small insects, they hunt them down. So he also used to hunt the rats in the hen house. Hen house means a special house outside your main house, in your yard or in your garden, where you put hens, like a small poultry house type of thing. So he had never had such a great time in all of his life, means he is really enjoying. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozens of times a day for the latest bulletin. Now we all know that Mrs. Pumphrey loved the dog very much. So dozens of times means din bhar mein kai baar she used to call Mr. James Harriet and she used to ask about the latest bulletin, means latest news on Tricky, how is he and everything. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather. Now every time the lady asked that Tricky is given all the cushions and the comfort that I have sent for him, and is he wearing the exact right coat according to the weather? And the narrator used to dodge these questions, means he used to neglect answering these questions because he was not following all these things, because he knew that these things were not needed at this moment. But I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convalescing rapidly. Convalescing means recovering. So as soon as he said the word convalescing or recovering, this seemed to have a positive effect on Mrs. Pumphrey. And Mrs. Pumphrey was happy that my dog is recovering, and that is why he started sending some food items to the surgery so that that could be given for Tricky. But these things obviously were not given by the narrator to Tricky, because according to him these things will spoil him. But he could not tell these things to Mrs. Pumphrey, then because that lady will feel bad about it. She's sending all those items for Tricky, but eventually these items are enjoyed by the narrator and his partner. Okay, quite hilarious. So we see what he's saying. She started bringing fresh eggs, 2 dozens at a time. 2 dozens mean 24 eggs at a time, and to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partner and I had two eggs each for breakfast. Now, these eggs were not given to Tricky by the narrator, but enjoyed by himself. So he and his partner, means James Harriet and his partner, they ate two eggs each early in the morning. They were enjoying the eggs which were sent by Mrs. Pumphrey for the dog. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. Now, then after that, she started sending wine for Tricky, because wine was is believed to help you in enriching the qualities of your blood. So it was to enrich Tricky's blood. But obviously, they are not going to give wine to the dog right now because he is under their treatment. So lunch became a ceremonial occasion with two glasses of wine before and several during the meal. They enjoyed the wine themselves with lunch and several during the meal time. So you see that this is the benefit that they are reaping out of Tricky, is that the eggs and the wine which are sent by Mrs. Pumphrey for Tricky are consumed and enjoyed by James Harriet and his friend. A funny moment in this chapter. So I'm finishing off this video right now, because if I try to cover the complete full chapter in this video, then this video will be too long. It is already crossed 27 minutes. So I want you to watch this video carefully. Do not miss any part of the video, and the remaining part of the chapter I will cover in second part of this video, which will be posted very soon on my channel. So if you like this video, do subscribe my channel Breaking the Barrier, and hit the bell icon next to the subscribe button, so that you can get the notification of the next video as soon as I upload them. And also mention your comments as to how you like the video. Okay, it's bye for now. I hope you will understand this chapter with the help of this video, and I hope you will excel in your life. Happy learning. Bye bye.